All right, let's just get one thing straight. Forget everything you've seen in the movies. We are about to dive into a serious, data-driven projection of how artificial intelligence is set to completely rewrite the rules of war. And we're talking about the next quarter century. This isn't science fiction, folks. This is the emerging reality of global conflict.
So at the very heart of this huge transformation is a fundamental shift. We're moving away from what we call kinetic warfare, the familiar world of bullets, bombs, and physical force, and into algorithmic warfare. The battle for supremacy isn't about brute force anymore. It's moving from the physical world into the realm of pure, raw computational power.
Okay, so to really wrap our heads around this evolution, we're going to break it down into 3 distinct phases. This will give us a super clear progression from the battlefields we know today to the conflicts of tomorrow.
First up, we're going to look at the automation of combat. That's where machines start taking over the traditional jobs. Then we'll get into how the battlefield itself gets redefined, becoming kind of invisible and, everywhere at once. And finally, we'll explore this wild future where physical war itself might just become obsolete. Yeah, you heard that right.
All right, let's dive right into this first phase. Projections put this somewhere between 2026 and 2033. And this is where we really start to see the mass replacement of human soldiers with autonomous systems, but in roles we'd still recognize today.
And what's really striking here is just how fast these technologies are expected to mature. I mean, we're talking about the first fully autonomous fighter squadrons. They're calling them loyal wingmen. By 2027, we'll see swarm warfare, where a single AI controls thousands, literally thousands, of cheap little drones to just overwhelm any defense. And in cyberspace, get this, AI won't just react to attacks. It's going to be proactively placing dormant mines inside enemy financial and electrical grids years before a conflict even starts.
So the big question is, why is this happening so fast? Well, the main driver isn't just that the tech is getting better. It's that we humans are reaching the absolute limits of our bodies and our minds. We are quite literally becoming the human bottleneck in modern warfare.
Okay, take a fighter pilot, for example. At 9 Gs, that's 9 times the force of gravity. The blood drains from their brain, and boom, they pass out. This is a hard, biological limit. You can't train your way out of it. Now, an AI-piloted drone, it can pull 20 Gs, maybe more, without even breaking a sweat. It can turn faster, it can react quicker, and it can push the laws of physics in ways the human body just can't. In a dogfight, the human suddenly becomes the liability. It's a total game changer.
But, this new reliance on AI brings with it some brand new, absolutely terrifying risks. By 2032, projections show we could see the first major diplomatic crisis caused by something called an AI hallucination. Now, what is that? It's when a defensive AI completely misreads harmless data, say a complex weather pattern, as an incoming missile attack, and it prepares to launch a full-on counterstrike, all without a single human in the loop.
Okay, so let's move on to the second phase from roughly 2034 to 2042. And if you thought that was wild, just wait. This is where the whole idea of a physical front line just begins to dissolve.
With all these new tools, nanodrones, devastating cyber attacks, autonomous killer satellites in orbit, the geographic boundaries of war are just erased. An enemy doesn't need to roll tanks across your border anymore. Why would they? They're already inside your networks, your cities, your airspace.
And one of the most powerful new weapons isn't a missile at all. It's information. This is where we enter the era of command deepfakes. This is where an enemy AI generates a perfectly realistic video of a general, or even a head of state, giving completely fake orders to their own troops.
Just imagine for a second. You're a soldier, and suddenly your own commander-in-chief appears on every single screen. It's their face, their exact voice, their mannerisms, and they're ordering you to surrender. The potential for chaos, for psychological collapse, it's immense. How do you even know it's real anymore?
And this slide really highlights that critical shift in where the fight is actually taking place. The main battlegrounds, they move from land and sea to 3 key domains. First, cyberspace, where an enemy can literally wipe your country's entire financial and civil records off the map. Second, low Earth orbit, to blind your GPS and all your communications. And third, the human mind itself, through mass disinformation and deepfakes.
So this all leads us to the third and final projected phase, between 2043 and 2050. And this is where things get truly bizarre. The very logic of war starts to eat itself, potentially making physical fighting completely obsolete. Welcome to the era of algorithmic deterrence. The easiest way to think about it is as the successor to nuclear deterrence. You've got these super powerful AIs on both sides, right? And they can run trillions of simulations and calculate with near-perfect certainty that a real kinetic war would lead to 100% mutual economic and technological annihilation. The cost is just too high for anyone to even start.
So instead of actually fighting, conflicts start getting resolved in what are being called sandbox battles. Here's how it works. A dispute comes up, right? Maybe over territory or a resource. Instead of mobilizing troops, the supercomputers of both nations run billions of war simulations against each other. The AIs figure out the statistical winner with almost no doubt. And then, the predicted loser just makes a diplomatic concession. They give up the asset without a single shot being fired, because they know a real war would be pointless and way, way more costly.
So, what does this all mean for the human soldier? Well, their role changes completely. They aren't really combatants anymore. The real fighting is done by machines and algorithms. The humans, they only come in afterward, almost like a kind of occupation police force, just to secure territory that has already been won or lost inside a simulation.
And this entire evolution, as you can imagine, completely redraws the map of global power in some fascinating ways. Nations and whole regions start to specialize in different kinds of algorithmic warfare, all based on their own unique strengths.
So what does that look like? Well, you see North America leaning hard into its tech edge, focusing on quantum computing for absolute dominance in space and cyber warfare. The Asia-Pacific region becomes what's called the Swarm Titans, just leveraging its immense industrial capacity to mass-produce drone fleets on a scale that can simply overwhelm any defense. Europe carves out a niche for itself as the ethical shield, specializing in impenetrable defensive AI. And then you have Africa, where we see the rise of the open-source guerrilla. This is a really interesting one. It's a form of asymmetric warfare, using widely available, low-cost, agile tech to ingeniously counter more powerful adversaries. It's all about being clever and agile, not just having the most expensive hardware. You see, power is no longer just about who has the most tanks and ships, it's about your technological specialty.
And this all leads us to a final, pretty profound question. In a world where your entire banking system can be erased with a few lines of code, where your leaders can be deep-faked into surrendering, and where the outcome of a war is calculated before it even starts, what does a line on a map, a border, truly mean anymore?